I am the bunny bun, and I am the ultimate bunny queen.
Q, but also POC histories, because in a lot of southern states in America, but also in a lot of countries, those histories are being completely written out of books and media. And so we wanted to form a podcast where we could get the information out there for people in a way that they could consume it, and kind of quick, easy, informative videos, but also in a way that was kind of fun and innumerable. We will be covering everything from big movements to themes, maybe a few debates on how to properly do praxis, as well as famous people and celebrities in the LGBT community. So if you, the viewers, have any topics or specific videos you would like to see with us, feel free to leave us a like or a comment below, and we'll be sure to get into that. Please note we do have a set schedule for a lot of videos, but we are always open. Like if a bunch of people come in and say, do X person, obviously that kind of moves it up the line. But today's video is going to be about the Mattachine Society, which is basically, for those who don't know, the first true, well, not really the first, but really the big uh, grand opus of gay movements in America that ultimately, was the culmination of a lot of movements beforehand that formed into a bunch of other movements out of it. So the axiom of gay movements in America. Um, and that is to say, the Mattachine Society, which was founded in 1950, shortly before a time in America called the homophile movement, which was really the first time that gay people were kind of getting out and getting recognized. It's important for us to note that the Mattachine Society was far from the first gay movement. There was actually a lot of gay movements that started in America way back in the 19 teens, 1920s, when many people of color had returned from France from World War One and would engage in a lot of cultural trends and a lot of acting and culture was brought over from France. Of course, France, being in Europe, had a lot of higher tolerance for more effeminate or quote unquote homosexual behaviors. Twisting, I know this is kind of your department, being our person of color, our host of color. Did you ever, in your histories, hear about like gay movements starting with people of color or in communities of color at the time?
Yeah, and like in my research, actually, I have noticed that like they were like, from what I understood, the a lot of the stronger points that are like talked about recently are like kind of it kind of started by black figures, and not only just black figures, not just gay black figures, like trans black figures. Like I thought that they were just like less the two that I'm referring to. What were their names? There was two names. I haven't pulled up right here real quick. Let me show. Um, I'm so sorry.
That's all right. No
Uh,
worries.
oh, they're right here. Okay, I found them. I found them. It was Marsha P. Johnson and Zazu Nova.
Yeah.
Both very prominent figures that were in Stonewall.
Hmm. And actually, there's a lot of intersection between Mattachine and Stonewall, as well as a lot of other movements at the time. But the Mattachine Society was originally founded in 1950, as I said. It was kind of first planned in 1948, but truly 1950, and it was. And this is kind of an issue. I'll tell the readers during my research and my other, kind of joking about this. It's typically when you research societies, the society that has like the group that has a bunch of praise and, oh, look at all the great stuff we did, those types of sources are typically written by the society themselves or people in the society. And then of course antithetical statements where it's like, oh, these people were horrible, that's typically written by, like the opposition. When you're researching the Mattachine Society, despite all the good they did, one of the things that's kind of famous with the Mattachine Society is they are notoriously known for just constant infighting and contradictory statements and kind of one going after the other. And I'm sure Callan and Twisting have plenty of experience being in gay movements that just can't seem to agree on anything.
Yep.
What's agreement? This is an anathema to
I've
them.
only been part of the community for how long now? Half a year. I've been part of
Well,
progressive movements for like almost a year, only almost a year, and I only realized I was part of the LGBTQ community for like a couple months, and I can
gosh.
already tell it's riddled with toxicity. It's crazy.
Hmm. So this is unfortunately where we're going to our first kind of issue with this. According to the Mattachine Society's official website, as well as Gay History, for those of you who don't know, we will be posting sources down below in the comment section and description of this video. For anybody who wants to know more, the official founder of the Mattachine Society, the originator, is of course Harry Hay. Harry Hay was born on April 7th, 1912, and he was a gay rights activist, communist, and labor agitator who would later be expelled from the Mattachine Society for by one of the anti-factions in a coup de vrille, which would be he would later go on to found the Radical Fairies, which is a loose. Well, I guess Callan, how would you describe the Radical Fairies? Because that was one of the ones you were going to research.
Yeah, the best way I could describe them is several different affinity groups. Like they did spawn a bunch of other like subgroups and whatnot, but then you have this whole thing where, which we'll go into later, about Harry Hay and how much power he has, but basically a bunch of different affinity groups.
Um, and yeah, so barring Harry Hay, the other point from the Mattachine Society itself is that there were several founders. So and this is again, I was reading documents from people in the 1970s that said like, oh, there was no official founder beyond Harry Hay. I was reading documents from people in the 1950s who were there who said there was two founders and like a hanger on. But fundamentally, I guess the people who are respected with being the originators and the founders is Harry Hay, Conrad Stevens, Dale Jennings, Geinrich, Stan Witt, Bob Hall, Chuck Rowland, Paul Bernard, and James Gruber. I would know my hosts don't have it, but when I do this video officially, we'll have the media up on a picture of them all together. Um, from what I've read and researched, it's pretty safe to assume that the actual people who ran most of the Mattachine Society, of course, were Harry Haight, who would be kicked out, Dale Jennings, Rudy Gernreich, and James Gruber. Those were basically the four big guys. Everybody else would kind of come and go. Those two would be consistent players throughout. So those are really the only names you really need to concern ourselves with as far as history goes in terms of impact. Um, Now the name, because I'm sure a lot of you people who are reading the title are like, hey, you misspelled Mache wrong, or you spelled machine wrong. Well, Mattachine Society was basically made by a bunch of frat house dudes from college who were inspired by the medieval Paris idea of masks. I don't know if you guys have heard like Vampire the Masquerade. Well, that's what a mask is. It's to quote Jonathan Katz, one mask group was known for their Society Mattachine. These were fraternities of unnamed townsmen who performed in public masked or in private parties masked to the delight of famous people, nobility, or other such communal groups. And that's from Jonathan Katz, 1976. The Mattachine Society was kind of, I guess, it was a fraternity within fraternities. So like Skull and Bones, these like college guys who form their own secret groups to do stuff. And fundamentally, that is how a lot of gay movements started initially. It was a collection of small, like, unnamed guys who'd show up to meetings in, like, cloaks and daggers. And part of that was to kind of hide from the greater white populist society as, like, ooh, these guys are spooky and mysterious. They have, like, weird stuff. But at the time, from the 1920s to 1950s, these types of fraternal groups were pretty popular. There was a lot of people who wanted to be in like secret groups. So you have like the Masons, you have the Mattachine Society, you have the Fraternal Order of Brothers. Everybody wanted to be in this secret group, and so it was pretty obvious that if you wanted to get a movement going, the best way to do it was to form a secret group with a lot of exclusivity. Thinking that because you're an exclusive group, you can keep a tighter group on members. There's a more like communal bonding, and it's a point by point recruitment. So I mean, initially, the Mattachine Society makes a lot of sense as to why it would be this kind of secretive. The problem
Kind of
is
like the
that when
Politburo.
yeah, kind of. I mean, that's a good comparison. Especially since the Politburo was just as dysfunctional and disorganized. um, but the name Mattachine, and to be fair for everybody, we are reshooting this video, so this will be kind of less of a shock. But the word Mattachine is an anglicized French word for the word Mattachine, which comes from Italian for Mattachino, which is a type of theater clown we would kind of know today commonly as a jester or a harlequin, who was in plays and TV shows. This type of a person would kind of be the comedic foil, the fourth wall breaker, kind of like when the king would make an order, the Mattachino would kind of take pot shots at the king. And another thing I also noticed too is that the word mache, like paper mache, also comes from the word mattachine, because a lot of these jesters and stuff would actually make their masks out of paper mache or reeds dipped in wax. And then vibrantly painted, because as it turns out, while the jesters were in fact taking, kind of taking the piss out of the king, the actor who played the jester didn't want to kind of be known in public for doing that stuff because this was a time when Pope still killed people for making jokes. Right. Just in case people think that people wanting to kill comedians is a more commonplace thing.
And again, it
Um,
ties back really well to Stalinist Russia.
what a twist. Um, I would have a lot more respect for some of the comedians that claim to be canceled if they dressed up like a jester, went on stage, juggled fire, and made fun of like Putin. I would have a lot more respect for them. But Matt Tashino actually has a further fun little thing on this, and I went down this rabbit hole. So Matt Tashino actually came from a anglicized pronunciation of the Moorish pronunciation of the Arabic word mutawahajin, or mask wearer, which was an Arabic performer who wore a mask and swords and did acrobatics and sword dances. They typically were dressed in bright colors and tended to perform the position of roles of monsters, evil kings, or spirits in a lot of ancient Arabic plays and Islamic retellings of the Bible. This type of art of sword dancing is further exemplified by Africa, where all over northern and central Africa there was different variations on the word muwato. Muwato being the specific sword that the African people would dance with, and each tribe kind of had a different muwato, so they'd have a different sword with a different dance style. And many of these swords were originally actual war swords, where they would recreate their dances of battle and their tyrants of glory. And of course, it would later go into more of a ceremonial thing, with the swords being more intricately decorated, the outfits being more garish. And then, of course, they would be picked up by the caliphates when they moved into Africa, moves north into Spain and Italy when the caliphate moves up there before the Crusades, gets picked up by the French, and then, of course, we have Mattachine. So the term Mattachine is a anglicized French word based off of an Italian jester, which is based off of a Arabic sword dancer based off of essentially a African sword saint. Yes. Just in case that wasn't confusing enough. Yeah, I know a lot of people will probably say, like, "Oh, there's no such thing as African sword saint." No, there is. There's a ton of them. I only use sword saint because it's a. Oh, what is this? Okay, my Bandicam stopped because I can only record 10 minutes. Like that. I downloaded it over I because I'm cheap and I'm getting better software soon. Bandicam is a stopgap. Fortunately, you're recording, so we're good. We'll edit this in post. This is true. I have OBS. It's just downloading right now. Okay, so I think we talked about this. I think we talked about this before, but for those of you who don't know, and also for all you comic book nerds, I'm about to skull fuck your minds. Um, Deadpool, the character from Deadpool, was originally going to be called Mattachino Man or the Mattachine Machine, and was originally going to be a gay superhero. He was also originally going to be black too. So the original design concepts by Fabian Nacira and Rob Liefeld, of which I did look this up. So Fabian Nacira was the original designer and writer for Deadpool, but Rob Liefeld was the person who ultimately edited him and did like the character customization and the refinement. Rob Liefeld, of course, does not do Deadpool anymore, and I do believe he refuses to even be associated with Deadpool at this point in time. Because of the way Marvel fucked him over with the contract deals, from what I researched afterwards. But originally, Deadpool was supposed to be the pitch was for a gay superhero because this is at the end of the AIDS movement and kind of X-Men was kind of dying down, and a lot of Marvel comic books and Dark Horse comic books and DC comic books wanted to tackle the AIDS crisis because comic books were all about that type of social justice at the time, being the AIDS crisis. Right. For all the people that are like, I hate X-Men because they made it political. It's like, it's always been political. What are you talking
It's
about?
always been that way.
Or a fake nerd. Yeah, is like Storm is the first, well, not the first black superhero, but I noticed of all the X-Men to get like origin stories, no one's even touched Storm yet, and she's by far one of the most complicated and interesting characters in the X-Men. Right behind Beast. Um, yeah, Deadpool or Mattachino Man, which I'm actually gonna start calling him that now from now on, just to piss people off. Mattachino Man was originally supposed to be launched in the New Mutants number 98, and the original request from Marvel was, quote, a Joker character who was a good guy but still could kick butt. So an anti-hero. Of course, using the Mattachine being jesters who broke the fourth wall all the time. That type of humor was very common with Mattachinos in Italy. They basically came up with the design for Deadpool, although he did have instead of red, he was pink, and he was going to be very exorbitantly gay, and even was considered to have at the time, the upside down pink triangle from Act Up and the Fight for Life as his symbol.
Oh my.
Um, yeah, Marvel responded with in 1991, does he have to be gay? Keep in mind they
Of course.
asked for a gay superhero. We needed to be one of those closeted gay superheroes. And this was another funny thing too. So like I was telling you guys originally, this is a time when Marvel was like this is like Hellraiser and Spawn and like Ghost Rider and Lobo. These are like the edgy '90s of comic books. Um, there was an attempt by Marvel to make other gay superheroes based on Mattachine characters, including actually a character that was originally designed to be called the Mattachino Man after Deadpool, whose cover name was actually Harry Gruber, a mixture of Harry Hay and James Gruber. However, this character was pretty fucking offensive, from what I understand. No concept art or sketches can be found, but from what I've read from the references made by Marvel characters, ostensibly they were going to make him a drag queen, but like in the most offensive way possible.
Yeah, that's what we need. More bad drag representation.
The heteros are making me upset, Rose. Um, Digressing back to topic. So the Mattachine Society actually did take a lot from its Mattachino roots, and actually decided to take the a diamond pattern or Harlequin diamonds as their look. For those of you who need to know what Harlequin diamonds are, the kind of quadruple diamond pattern diamonds you see on Harley Quinn, who also was a originally designed to be a Mattachino gay character. Of course, she got a lot farther because lesbianism is more accepted in our patriarchal society.
Well, plus
That is
stuff
her,
with these.
right. Oh god, even to this day, Harley Quinn is still fetishized, which is hilarious considering that I think Birds of Prey is probably the best depiction of a gay superhero to date. And he no, but they did. Margot Robbie did canonize the fact that that was like the beginning of like the gay arc. Like there was a lot of gay energy in it, and it was obviously unspoken because Marvel wants to get those Chinese dollars and Middle Eastern dollars.
The
But yeah,
Chinese
no.
dollar.
Margot Robbie did confirm that there was originally. I think she confirmed that Harley Quinn is in fact gay, and that was kind of like the start of her breaking up with Joker, with the start of her joining up with Poison Ivy. Again, still, but sorry, digressing. Those types of diamonds will be the symbol of the Mattachine Society, which, for those of you who don't know, there was a popular slur about the Mattachine Society for a very brief time called Diamond Dicks, which of course was later parodied and I would arguably say reappropriated by the gay community when gay daddies or gay tops, as they're now called, would either paint their genitals entirely in glitter paint or wear jock straps decorated with rhinestones to the San Francisco Pride Parade. So yeah, if you ever go to the Pride Parade and see a guy wearing a diamond jockstrap or covering his dick in glitter, that is a reference to the Mattachine Society, which is actually common. I know research this, but I talked to my friends about it who is in San Fran. A lot of people who are formerly in the Mattachine Society or in a group associated with Mattachine Society will do that. So the Diamond Dicks is still kind of a kind of a popular thing amongst like the older gay community. So, interesting. But the Madison Society really was popular for, aside from the infighting, take a shot. It was it was popular for three big things, and I'll have the media up on screen right now when I do this officially for the cover. The Madison Society produced a crap ton of written literature and sourcing for propaganda, including one of my favorite ones, which is in the 1950s, after they had been kind of excised by Eisenhower's Executive Order 009, which banned gay people from holding public office. The Mattachine Society famously put up this piece of propaganda from New York that said homosexuals are different, but then went on to explain in various versions why it's really none of your fucking business. And that was kind of really like a lot of these like libertarian, mind your own business, the government should intercede type arguments actually comes directly from the Madison Society. The statement of like, I don't care if you're gay, what happens in your house is your business. I just don't come after me, bro. Actually, that originated from the Madison Society, where they said, hey, you shouldn't matter what I do in my house. I'm not doing it to you, so mind your own fucking business. Which in a time of McCarthyism was pretty profound, really, when you think about it. Right. But I will
Exactly.
also the Madison Society, their second big thing was promoting gay news. Now, for those of you who don't know, news media was just as biased as it is today. Lots of stories were left out, and of course, it's hard for us to find them as a primary source. So that's why diaries are always my go-to. If I can find a diary someone wrote, that's perfect. So if any of our listeners want to be famous one day, please, for the love of God, leave a diary. Especially if you're especially if you're trans or a person of color, re-seize the written essay as your preferred medium for me. Um, but the Madison Society would like the Stonewall riots. The only reason and the only person who really reported on it besides local like small time newspapers was the Madison Society. And the only people to get the word out for a lot of these groups was the Madison Society. So for gay publications, gay poetry, gay events, Mattachine Society was the go-to, and they were prolific. These people were on par with Marx for how much they were writing, creating propaganda, and in fact, it was to the point that like there was concerted efforts I've discovered in later research from police officers and civil servants who would try to take down their stuff. In fact, I do believe the Chicago and California's San Francisco and LA branches actually put together specialized civilian ordinances, like small armies of civilians to patrol the areas the Mattachine was operating in to take down their propaganda. This is a group of like 60 people who were being like belabored by groups of like 500.
Hmm.
So the other thing that they formed was really the first official gay meeting spaces. So The Mattachine Society would, of course, splinter pretty early on in its development. 1952 was when they would start having cross-country splinter factions and start sending their feelers out. And Mattachine societies were really the first places for gay people to be free, because again, they were built like masks and fraternities. They were meeting spaces. This kind of gave a place for not only gay people to meet and talk to other gay men, but also for meetups, for writing campaigns, to talk about each other's stories. It kind of was effectively the first safe space for gay people. Now, unfortunately, this is 1950s America, so patriarchy does still hold a huge sway, especially in the gay movement. Many of these Madison Society groups were predominantly white gay men. Women were almost never given entry, and people of color would be given entry later on. But up until about 1967, mostly we're only seeing white men offering in the Madison Society, which is typically why gayness, or was actually the source of why gayness is kind of seen as a white liberal extravagancy among people of color. And I think Twisting, you can talk more about that. Hmm. Yeah. Spoilers. Um, so the society would meet under a variety of names, such as the Bachelors Anonymous and the Society of Fools. Ironically, it would kind of try. This is kind of another thing that I think, Callan, you might have run into with your research. From what I understand, the attempt to change the name from Mattachine Society to Bachelors Anonymous, a joke on Alcoholics Anonymous, was done after Harry Hay left. I don't know if you came across that in your research that the Mattachine Society tried to rebrand itself after the Radical Fairies were formed in 1959. Did you,
I
Callan?
came, yeah, I came across a brief mention of that.
Okay,
That
so
they,
yeah, so the reason I ask is because, like I said, a lot of these sources and diaries I was reading are really contradictory because no one had a straight source to say on this. Because again, lots of infighting meant a lot of axiomatics, but we'll get to that in a moment. So
if there's
by
one thing we
1950,
can do, it's sabotage each other.
all right, just we are. I kind of want to. Maybe I'll cut it in here, but there should be. I was watching Death, Love, and Robots, the most recent episode, and the first episode about like a evil crab that sneaks onto a boat causes like this crew of sailors to basically kill off two of its members, and they're like, oh, they voted and they voted against the general cause, so now because I've got rid of the two traitors, we are united in action and purpose. And I'm like, man, sometimes I join groups and I'm like, that's really what we just need to do. Just not shoot people, but like just kick out the people that are just not bound in purpose. Um, I mean, I'll probably will cut that in. Well, I don't want to kill. Well, actually, and this is kind of funny too, because this is a good segue. That's actually what I love the Machine did. Not kill people, but like it would start up a group, people would be dissatisfied, and then people would break off and form a splinter group with specific beliefs. So like if the Mattachine Society at the time was more along the peace, optics, love route, they would have a violent radical group that would break off, and then it's like, oh, if you don't like us, go join them. And so that's why I say like it worked really great as an axiomatic system, but like that is kind of what the benefit to having multiple groups with multiple approaches to the same idea that are unified in a general goal works. Me personally, my version of community organizing is I don't necessarily need you all to agree with me. I just need to know that when I point you in the general direction, give you a smack on the ass, everybody tends to move in that direction. What happens afterwards is completely up to the will of the dice. Um, but this, of course, by 1951, they were officially up and running. They had their own branch office in New York. And by 1952, they would actually have a full fledged constitution with amendments, goal purpose, and a charter. Unfortunately, by 1953, the infighting, take a shot, would then begin to break, and the Constitution of the Mattachine Society would have to be amended 23 times. For those of you who don't know, it took America about 160 years to get to 23 amendments. So, yeah, gays move at us. We move at breakneck speed. Uh, Callan wouldn't know about that. Callan is a snake, so they're just all neck.
Exactly.
It's a danger noodle.
Nah.
Now, I also found this out. So at this time, Harry Hay had a really good idea, and he worked with Rudy Ganreich and Dale Jennings to solve this problem because obviously a lot of factional infighting, take a shot, was gonna basically was gonna torch the movement. So the society came up with a great idea: start sending the more radical elements to other areas to start making their own Mattachine societies. Now, kind of the way that this worked out was, in theory, they would go to other cities, find gay men, and start up shell movements. Those shell movements would report to their local leaders. Local leaders report back to the national convention. Basic top-down military procedure. Unfortunately, because these societies were basically getting up and going towards the end of the 1950s, into the 1960s, the civil rights movement was in full swing. So what would happen is a lot of these movements would go to other big civil rights movements, either women's lib or the civil rights, and they would kind of start to parasitically pull away from the group. They'd try to get black actors in, they would try to get female actors in, they would try to get, in a lot of cases, Dominican Republican or Latinx people in, or Latino, excuse me. And they would start pulling these different groups in, and it kind of gave them the image of being coattail riders. Like the Mattachine Society could not physically get enough members on its own, so it had to go to these other meetings and kind of poach groups off. This would ultimately be the reason why I think gayness and gay people are kind of seen as like a white liberal male thing, is because that is totally a white liberal thing to do, is to go to other movements and try to poach people for your own nefarious means instead of lending your support where you could. The other thing too, like I said, the Mattachine Society was prolific at creating propaganda. I don't ever see the Mattachine Society publishing a lot of propaganda outside of gay spaces, and I don't really see them using their like, hey, civil rights movement in Chicago. We're white. We have access to a lot of funds. We can kind of like, this is the civil rights era. Why don't we help you get like stuff out of places from like businesses that won't serve you because we're white? And then in return, you kind of like, help us out with some of our movements by showing unity. That would have been the smart way to go about it. Instead, again, white patriarchy says that, hey, black people, you should help the gays. And of course, those movements were like, please fuck off. Yes. Unfortunately, this would also lead to a lot of problems with different variations of the Mattachine Society forming more radical or less radical movements than the main home base. And of course, we would see a lot of them start to fall by the wayside. In fact, at several points in time between 1957 and 1963, members of the Mattachine Society would actively be working against each other in order to achieve certain goals. Because as it turns out, when you're a part of two groups that are kind of diametrically opposed to things or don't have unified beliefs, at one point in time, you'll be asked to make a loyalty. You'll be given a loyalty test. Like, I just want to say that, like, not hitting on civil rights movements or gay movements. This is in all movements in general. If you represent the allegiances of two parties, you will be given a loyalty test at one point in time. There's just no way around it. That's just how it works. Right, and to be fair, like it's the tribalism of humanity, but it's also because like you know people want to know where you stand, and especially today, like there's a lot of bad, like I think the term is bad faith now, a word that's thrown around to ostensibly just character assassinate people more often than not. But yeah, it's a purity test. It's okay. Do you stand with us as a civil rights member, or do you stand with the gay people as a gay rights member? And at this time, I can understand why. Well, maybe I shouldn't speak on that, but I personally can understand why a person who is a person of color in the fight for civil rights would side more with the civil rights activists than a gay activist, even if they were also a person of color and gay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and also that of like the fight for equal rights as people of color have been going on for what really since 19 or 18 arguably since 1619 our country was officially being colonized, but arguably longer than that, probably at least the 1300s when the transatlantic slave trade was starting to get up and running, or the 1400s, sorry. The transatlantic slave trade was starting to get up and running. So at 1963, arguably for 300, almost 400 years, versus the fight for gay rights in America, really only got going in the 1920s. Let's just say turn of the century, 1900s. So I get, and not to mention huge amounts of stigma against black people compared to gay people, because like you said, it's easier to pass as a gay person than it is to pass as a white person when you are a person of color. So I can totally see where the calculus had to be made in that, which is why I don't hold anybody accountable for the purity tests. That's just a point of like, look, the fight for people of color is bigger than the fight for gay people, but it doesn't mean we hate gay people. Time for your purity test, Yalmandra.
It's
You know what the sad part is? So for those of you who know, I was the Chaz slash Chop in Seattle. When the Proud Boys started showing up there and the Trumpies, I took home. The Proud Boys at the time weren't wearing the yellow ribbons. They were still doing the MAGA hats. I took 3 of those hats home as trophies from the people I beat up. After I presented those to people, I still got purity tested. To this day, I still get purity tested on a lot of things. It's like, are you fucking kidding me?
we must purity test you now.
Right. Also, I am Sapien 227. Also, something I read in some diaries, but I didn't read it enough for it to actually be. I don't want. I'm going to read this as an allegation. I don't have enough information to prove it's true. It was after my research, the first shooting this video. But allegedly, some people in the Mattachine Society claim that the purity tests were not done at all, and was actually kind of a spoof or a kind of like reverse false flag to try and garner more sympathy with like people of color and other movements like women's lib, where it was like, hey, part of your group is giving us purity tests in kind of like a reverse psychology version, be like, oh, have that group say we're not going to hold purity tests, they're with us in arms. So I want to say right now that I don't really think the purity tests happened, or if they did, it was more on an individual level versus like a systemic issue, and that it was kind of played up by the actors in the various splinter groups to kind of make themselves feel like they were being victimized by their own protesters. Like I said, I just read it in diaries. There was references to it. It's not enough for me to prove one way or the other, but I do kind of find myself leaning on the idea that while these groups were parasitic, I don't think purity tests were going the way they thought they were. I really just think they were bad at recruitment and were trying to come up with a way to get like communities to funnel themselves into the group. White assimilation, if you will. you okay? Oh, hang on. Are you okay? Okay, cool. What happened? Is it an apple? Okay. Well, I'm running an Asus, so don't worry. We thought I thought you were like you died.
I did. The CIA finally got me.
God damn it! Fucking CIA.
Always up to no good.
It'd be so hilarious. You like pop back in. Haha! You missed me, you piece of shits.
You miss me.
My windows on my house are rated for everything to including a 50 caliber sniper rifle. Go fuck yourself.
I only played dead.
Exactly.
You'll never
Cover-
get this
cover-
commie alive.
Covers yourself in flour. Pardon me, fellow white man. Have you seen a person of color in here recently? Oh,
Hello
no, I
there.
have not.
Fellow white man.
My name is Beauregard Poulet.
Poulet.
Montgomery P. Bovite.
Robert Bartholomew Carnegie.
My name is Leviticus Cornwall.
No, I do not see. I have not seen any Negroes around these parts.
Oh god, what was that old joke I used to watch? Oh, by the way, are you recording again or?
I'm recording.
Okay. Oh god, there was a sign where it was like, I think it was a Key and Peele sketch, and it was like a guy's trying to read the sign on the side of the highway, one of those like really tiny ones about like zoning laws, and he goes past a stop sign and gets like in a car accident. It's like in the deep south, and they're like, ain't you watching where you're going? Read that stop sign. And the black guy's like, no, massa, I don't, sir. I didn't know nothing about. I can't read no octagonal sign. And the white guy just goes, hey, who taught you the word octagonal? Kill him.
Who taught you the word octagonal?
This one can read.
This one can read, boys. Get him.
So that split's done. We'll get back into it.
We have to leave this part in.
A few moments later. So
And
what's up, Callan?
oh, I just said and uncut.
Uncut. It must never be cut.
Oh god, the joys of being half Jewish. So at this point in time, I guess we kind of moved into the 1970s. Now, at 1969, obviously Stonewall happens. The Christopher Street riots, as some of you may know, and the Mattachine Society really stepped up to the plate on this one. A lot of the factional infighting, take a shot, fell by the wayside because now was time to really solidify a brown movement. Most of the writings about Stonewall were published, produced, and publicized by the Mattachine Society, from why the bar was being attacked to the plights of other gay bars getting shut down in that time frame, to other riots and movements that had sparked up, diaries, statements, the fact that while the media had depicted the Christopher Street riots as being a predominantly white thing, the Mattachine Society openly explicit that there was actually a pretty even mixture of people of color as well as BIPOC people there. So, and then of course Marsha Jackson being noted as the key goer, and the Mattachine Society did produce several contradictory reports as to why Stonewall happened. I tend to go with the standard belief: Marsha P. Jackson was being harassed by a police officer. She struck back, and the riot broke out. Because remember, everybody, the gay movement was started because a black woman beat a cop up for mistreating her. And anybody who says the gay movement shouldn't be about violence and carving out our place in society is one of your oppressors. They're just wearing a nice badge in June.
Yes. Oh, and one of the most gangster things that ever happened, from what I've read, Zazunova, like, when she was being harassed by these people during the riots, she beat them away with a chain.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, yeah. From what I understand, Marsha Jackson actually managed to get one of her hands free, and yes, was wielding a brick and a chain. One of the reports I read. So, keep that in mind when someone says, "We swear we would never break the chain." Uh, now you know what Fleetwood Mac was singing about. But by the 1970s into the 80s, the Mattachine Society would have fundamentally formed 83, at current count, different gay movements, including the Daughters of Bilitis, a lesbian organization, the Janus Society, which was a more violent and eccentric gay movement, as well as many more that would last about a year and then fail away. So this is kind of where I want to say that the Mattachine Society really worked well as an axiom. If there's a gay movement, there's chances are right now it started from the Mattachine Society. So while itself was a complete dysfunctional mess, it was really good at producing additional movements. So I guess we can't, I don't want anybody to think I'm being overly critical or harsh of the Mattachine Society. They were a net good at the end of the day. It's just they had a lot of dysfunction. The white supremacy, or not white supremacy, but the white patriarchal system they were based upon, the push for white gay supremacy over the rest of the community, and the constant dysfunction, reamendments, factional infighting. By the way, some of this factional infighting, I read this one up in my later research. One of the factions actually had an issue with the fact that Harry Hay was kicked out and formed the Radical Fairies, and they stated that Harry Hay should be offered back a position in the Mattachine Society, which a lot of people were kind of in favor of, but all of them agreed that he could only be offered back in if he disbanded the Radical Fairies. And Callan, was the Radical Fairies gaining a lot of ground in 1973?
Yeah. I think they were
Hmm.
even at the point of some infighting.
That's hot.
Petty, petty, petty warlords.
And you've grown when you have infighting.
Uh, well, if that's the case, then leftist liberal societies are fucking ancient. Um, so by this point in time, however, by the 70s and 80s, there was a ton of movements between Vietnam, civil rights, women's liberation, the gay movement, ACT UP and the Fight for Life would start forming at the AIDS movement. The global community for love, punk rock movements from Britain were starting to pick up on the gay movement. In fact, for those of you who don't know, if you ever see a punk rocker with purple laces, that's a gay punk. And they were very welcome in a lot of these societies. There was actually a punk society, a gay punk society that came out of the Mattachine Society. So lots of different political movements breaking up, and by 1984, 1983, the Mattachine Society, I'm happy to say, was no longer suffering from factional infighting. Take a shot. They had finally gotten their shit together. The infighting was done from the past few 20 years. They were solidified in their movement. They were about to march forward, and just in time for the second march on Washington for gay and lesbian rights, of which the Mattachine Society helped to organize the first march, so naturally it stands to be the second. Unfortunately, at this point in time, they were just in time to be recognized as basically being old, doddering fools who had lost track of what gay movements were supposed to do. So, gone is factional infighting. Now get ready for outsourced grouping.
Yeah.
In fact, Larry Kramer, who we will learn about later on, would be voted to actually speak in place of the current runner for the Mattachine Society, which was one of those people we told you was not important. That being Bob Hull. Bob Hull was supposed to speak at the second march. He got X'd out by Larry Kramer. Stan Witt protested to also be a second runner. They replaced him with another group that pretty much disbanded after the second march, so they're really not important. But essentially, they were kind of seen as just being like the older gay movements, and they weren't all that important. They had nothing to say. And when Larry Kramer made his famous speech, "Are you all ready to have a gay movement that's going to change America?" The Mattachine Society supported him, but the Mattachine Society had chosen to be more of a publication and peace operation, so more the logistics wing of it. They would work with Larry Kramer for a short time, but after Larry Kramer pushed for a more like benefits of lesbians, pushing more for straight people, started getting more violent and in your face interface, the Mattachine Society would dump him, which of
Wait,
course
so
be.
you mean when he started to do actual activism?
Well, so here's my thing. A big reason that I read with the Mattachine Society why they didn't like Larry Kramer is, and we'll get into this when we do the ACT UP and Fight for Life. When the ACT UP marches on Wall Street for the first time, Larry Kramer put the women and addicts, although I hate calling them addicts, so I will say victims of drug overuse, to the forefront to show that everybody was suffering from HIV and AIDS, not just specifically gay men. A lot of the Mattachine Society got upset because they thought that the gay men started the movement, so gay men should be at the front, which is why they think it should be GLBT, not LGBT.
I love being at
And
the
this,
front.
right? So this was the first, and honestly, it's a nitpick, but again, factional infighting. So that was kind of the thing too, is that these people are so focused about having their gay white male supremacy, they lose track of the fact that Kramer was actually doing benefits here. So I wouldn't say that like Kramer wasn't doing actual activism. I think the thing was is that they kind of saw themselves as being the starters of the movement, even though they weren't. They put in all the hard work, even though they didn't, and they were producing most of the publications and logistics work, even though they weren't. So they kind of, it's that like self-entitled narcissist thing. Like, we've been working so hard. Yeah, but you've only got, like, you were around for 20 years at this point in time, 30 years, and you've only just now got your shit together. How good can you be?
Bitch. Make sure you call them a bitch while you're at it.
Ironically enough, another problem they came into in 1987 was that Larry Kramer worked with the Radical Fairies, or there what was left of them at that point in time, to help push AIDS movements and start movements. And at that point in time, the Mattachine Society had nothing more to do with Larry Kramer.
Woo!
Oh yeah, I don't know if you came across that in your research, Callan. Um,
A little bit, yeah.
so when protests started getting more violent, and like the die-ins, the AIDS pushing for changes to healthcare stuff, and these younger, more virulent people being in the movements, the punk rock movements, the anarchists. The Mattachine basically got out and was used a lot by right wing outlets to kind of show, like, why can't these new gays be like the old gays who just sat around and moaned all day? Us right wingers would support more people like the Mattachine Society, mainly because they're easier to manipulate and control.
Yeah, nothing patriarchal or white-centered about those guys. Of course you're gonna side with that. It's no
Um,
wonder the movement looks like a bunch of just white culture propaganda stuff to black people.
yeah, in fact, actually, for those of you who are young to this, the gay movement has typically been broken up into three different groups. There's the old gays, the new gays, and the baby gays. That's typically what people associate with. So, old gays actually comes from the Mattachine Society. Old gays are essentially anybody who was gay during the boomer years into Gen X. New gay, well, would be the millennials and the zoomies. And then baby gays was always basically people who are within their first years of being gay, still trying to figure out what their stuff is. So if you're a person who's transitioning, you still haven't figured it all out, that you're technically considered a baby gay.
True. That's exactly what I am.
So twisting, you're a baby. Callan, what are you? Are you a baby gay, an old gay, a new gay,
I guess I'd be considered a baby.
baby gay?
My egg
Maybe
hatched like a
snake.
month ago. Well, 2 months ago? A
So
month and a half.
I'm technically a new gay, even though I'm an old man at 25.
Yes.
Because I expressed having gay tendencies when I was 13 with a friend of mine from school, and of course that was like end of the 90s into the 2000s, where it was like really homophobic shit. So that being said, though, old gays, new gays, and baby gays, it's total bullshit. There are baby gays or newer gays that are totally into violent protests. There's ones that are into being safe and being optical. The way you commit your praxis has nothing to do with what generation you're in. The way you do praxis is what you have access to, what you can availably do within your space, and whatever you personally can accomplish with your mental state. Obviously, if you are a person who lives in a deep red state, in a conservative household, who's like 16 years old, you can't be expected to go out there and throw bricks at cops at a gay pride parade, obviously. Um, so never feel like because of the way that you're doing your praxis is reliant upon the communities you have to fit in. Just want to say that to our listeners. Um, Now, the Mattachine Society in the 90s basically would go quiet. Veteran members would be dropped out. Younger firebrands would step up, get moved out. I wouldn't say factional infighting, but the movement kind of didn't really know where to go at that point in time. And it really wouldn't until about 2001, where the group would be overtaken by new founders who would refuse to put their names down and refuse to follow any of the old trappings. And they've rebranded themselves as the New Mattachine Society, which was originally going to be the name for this podcast until I found out that they had formed that. And they're also very litigious, as it turns out. Even if we spelled the New Mattachine Society N-U, Mattachine, there was almost a guarantee for a lawsuit. Like,
That's cute.
Weirdly litigious people. But to be frank, they are actually doing a lot to clean out their kind of history of doing stuff.
The garbage.
Yeah. It's also good to note that at one point in time, the Mattachine Society was the largest. When we account for all their splinter groups that still owed allegiance to the Mattachine Society, I did the tabulations. In 1963 to 1967, which was their arguable peak, and counting for all the splinter groups, we're looking at a population of about 120,000 gay people associated with the Mattachine Society across this country. Which is not small by any means at that point in time. Like 120,000 people. For basic people who want it interesting, 120,000 people is about 5 Normandies worth of troops. American troops, excuse me. So consider all the American troops given over to Normandy and times it by 5. That's basically the amount of gay people we had at any one time. This is 10 times the amount of people that were sent over in the Expeditionary Force to World War I. And this is roughly the same amount of people who were working in for Vietnam. This is about the first 2 years of Vietnam drafts. This is a lot of fucking people at its peak. And part of that reason it got a peak is because in 1963, Congressman John Doughty pushed for legislation that would revoke a license for the Mattachine Society to solicit funds from Washington as a political organization under the name the Mattachine Society of Washington. So this is again when Harry Hay had been kicked out and they were trying to rebrand. For those young people who don't know, I don't know if it still exists now. I imagine the boomer tumor has written it out. But as long as you could prove you were a political organization, you used to be able to solicit funds from the government to get like paper, pencils, publication equipment. Ostensibly, basically, like you're a political organization, you want your representation, the government has to fund you to a degree the ability to spread your message. This is, of course, not necessarily the case now. There's a lot more stipulations to it. Ironically enough, it has been abused a lot by white supremacist organizations like the KKK and the Oath Keepers, would you believe, as of most recent.
Yeah, that's really
But ostensibly, if you can get, basically through your state government, if you can get verified as a legitimate political group in your state, you can solicit the federal government for money. So if any of you want to run for government or are interested in becoming like a union or a political organization, look into that because it goes a long way to solving that little funds issue that typically comes up when politically organizing. But yeah, so it's safe to say that the Mattachine Society ran about 1958 to about 1992. 1992 to about 2011, it was completely silent as it went through numerous re-envisionings. And as of current, while the new Mattachine Society, I should say, is I've actually reached out to them and they sent me back an email. That was basically a lot of like propaganda stuff and like, oh, go to our website for this. As far as I understand, they do a lot more supporting now of gay groups, and they are actually working with the ACLU to fight the anti-trans legislation that's been coming out. Even though again, the Mattachine Society. Yeah, actually, they're helping to fund lawyers and stuff. They've gotten representation, so it seems like kind of the new Mattachine Society seems to be more about like, working from the shadows and being supportive rather than being a frontline force, which I actually think is probably a smarter idea considering the last time they were frontline. Yeah, it's what we need more now than anything else. You need to have that strong foundation.
I'm more like worried about effectiveness than like all this performative publicity drama garbage.
Well, and when someone's busy fighting court cases, at least they can go into other movements and trying to poach the members.
Yeah. That's God's trans bill. Oh Lord, scares the fuck out of me, man.
Now, I will honestly, this is a weird part of my information I looked up today, and I found this out. So, are you familiar with the app Grindr?
Unfortunately,
Yeah,
yes.
Okay, well, unfortunately, I'm in Seattle, so Grinder has been good to me.
Uh,
Um, Grinder actually was made by a former member of the Mattachine Society who enjoyed the kind of dating hookup culture that was frequent in these societies and attempted to replicate it online. So Grinder actually, in a sense, exists because of the Mattachine Society. Would you believe?
it's a Mattachine app.
Wonderful. I've never used Grindr. I just have like a thing against dating apps.
Yeah, just imagine being the women on Tinder in the early 2000s. That's what Grinder is currently.
Lord,
An endless barrage of dicks.
it sucked as a cis guy. It's this straight guy. So, oh Lord, my predicament now is you know,
Um, it's also fair to note that the Mattachine Society did provide a lot of support for victims of sexual abuse. In fact, the Mattachine Society was one of the few members to actually write about gay abuse in the church, Catholic Church, with molestation of children, choir boys, stuff like that. They were hardlining that for a long time in the 1970s. Of course, unfortunately, because of the nature of those court cases and the nature of the power of the Catholic Church, we weren't able to find much of like the specifics of the court cases. But honestly, being an actual support group for victims of gay abuse or of sex abuse in the gay community, it's a big thing for the Mattachine Society. So again, a group that was fundamentally dysfunctional, but when like it's kind of like Dr. Seuss, like fundamentally dysfunctional, but when they get it right, they get it fucking right and they hit the nail on the head each time. So I mean, you just kind of like really one of those groups that could benefit from a solid leader, but fundamentally to themselves, they weren't. They were doing more good than harm. Um,
yeah.
I also kind of want to end this out too with when the Mattachine Society. For those of you who don't know, in World War II, there was several gay troops who were discharged under Section 8, which didn't exist until World War One. Section 8 being basically inability to conform to military life, but also mental or behavioral issues that make it impossible for you to work with troops. The idea at the time was that gayness was contagious. For the Corporal Klinger from MASH is basically like an example of a Section 8, although he tries to get out of it with the Section 8. These types of groups tended to actually argue that the federal government should reinstate members who were dishonorably discharged from World War II for being gay, and that they should actually pay reparations to the families of people who were, World War II veterans who were gay, who were discharged and weren't given access to veterans funds. Those court cases were ultimately denied. They went nowhere. They're still being some the new Mattachine Society is fighting for some of them. Unfortunately, many of those people didn't have kin, so if they won the court case, the money wouldn't go anywhere. But it would be a retroactive put in there. So if any of you are military veterans, I recommend looking into that stuff and signing your name because regardless of your stance on the military, if you're a gay person who served in World War II and you helped kill fucking, regardless of what you do in your bedroom or where your heart belongs, your heart was in the right place that day. This also being funny because the U.S. Army openly recruited from lesbian groups to fund the women's worker movement in the factories. So yeah, but like there was literally like gay soldiers who were killing Nazis, and the government was like, "We appreciate you killing those dirt-sucking Nazis. The problem is though is that you enjoy touching other men's penises, so we're going to have to strip you of your rank and title."
Yay! Just like they did to black people.
As if sodomy wasn't a commonplace thing in the military.
Hmm. You
Also, I
know,
find it really funny.
is that I forgot what that practice was called that they do in the military.
Twisting, have you watched the Call of Duty Vanguard? Do you know anything about that?
Maybe I do. I don't follow the Call of Duty series a lot, but I know people that do follow and they tell me things.
Callan, do you know of Call of Duty Vanguard? Have you watched it at all?
Maybe like the first, maybe like the introduction to it.
Okay, so there's a scene in that show or in the game where a white fighter pilot fighting in the Battle of Bougainville a year before Bougainville actually happened, gets shot down and is rescued from the Japanese by a African American, by excuse me, quote unquote, a colored unit unquote. Now this is kind of a problem because number one, there was not a lot of people of color units in Bougainville. But also the idea that these black characters are written so like stereotypically done. It's like, I mean, it's cool that Call of Duty is showing off people of color in the war zone in a way like they're actually fighting and dying. Unfortunately, it's Call of Duty and they're named characters, so they get killed off pretty quickly. But one of the funniest things that happens is number one, the white fighter pilot who gets rescued doesn't know who Jesse Owens is. A white American soldier in 1944 doesn't know who Jesse Owens is.
Oof.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Also, they run into a position where it's like a very obvious sniper trap. And instead of sending the white officer out there, or white fighter pilot who's armed with just a pistol, then keeping their sniper who is a person of color on reserve to look for the sniper, they instead send the flamethrower trooper out first, and he goes, and I quote, "I hope they have grits in heaven."
Yeah, that's
I just want to
awesome.
say this. I grew up as a Southern boy. I'm from originally from Louisiana.
Louisiana.
Everybody there likes grits. It's not a black thing, okay? Like, I don't know.
That
Twisting,
really
do
is
you?
such a stupid stare. That's not even the common stare, dude. That is so dumb. Cause like, it's not a black thing. Like half of the things that they say are like the black stereotype. Oftentimes, it is just Southern stereotypes.
What?
Black
I
or
mean,
white. It's just Southern.
Twisting, do you like grits?
Yes.
Okay, Callan, do you like grits?
They're okay.
Okay, well, there you go. I love grits. I mean, fuck, I went to a Cajun restaurant with my partner the other day, and they were like, "Yeah, we all got grits as an appetizer." I'm like, "Do you got cheese grits?" Cheese grits, a little bit of Cajun sauce on top, and could you pour some bacon fat on top of it too, a little bit extra seasoning? Like, that's not a black thing. That's a fucking greasy fat Southerner
Really,
thing.
they did this thing with the when it comes to pork as well, like any kind of weird pork dish. That's not a black. That's a southern thing. That is a
They
southern
also
thing in
do that with
general.
like watermelon.
Well, they made a joke also in that same video. They make a joke about a Jefferson. Like, hey man, we get back to the Harlem. First thing I'm ordering is a cold glass of cognac and a Jefferson. For those of you who don't know, cognac became very popular among the black community after World War One because like France had a lot of access to fine liquors, and people of color and actually poor white people were actually be refused from purchasing high dollar liquors after a certain point by most liquor stores. But in France, cognac was very much out there. I personally hate cognac, but I also it's just too sweet for me.
I don't like
But yeah,
watermelon, so you know.
right. But I mean, for those who don't know, a Jefferson, however, is three beef patties topped with ham, bacon, slathered in cheese on top of a brioche bun with collard greens, red onions, coleslaw, Cajun mayo, and I think is it caramelized onions?
It's colonized onions.
Oh, nice onions. God damn it. Serve with a glass. Serve with a tall glass of milk, red beans and rice, and a hunk of cornbread. That's a Jefferson. Okay, I don't know who you are. I've met people of color who don't know what Jefferson is. I fucking love Jeffersons. They also give me heart attacks. Like I don't have heartburn unless I eat Jeffersons.
If it's not giving you like a severe heart attack and putting you in cardiac arrest, or just giving you like a stroke every time like a single taste bud touches it, it's not American.
Exactly.
The other one too is that in that Call of Duty Vanguard episode, the Mexican fighter, the Mexican tail gunner, makes a reference to blanched vegetables, and I want to know who the fuck thinks that like anybody besides white middle class suburbanites eat blanched steamed vegetables. I saute mine in fucking balsamic vinegar and dunk them with Italian seasoning. Like
Oh,
I, I'll eat zucchini and tomatoes topped with mozzarella cheese and covered in mango balsamic vinegar sauce. I don't know what this world is, where it's like, oh, it's black, so they must eat fried chicken and watermelon and grape tang.
Grape tag. It is true. Like I do be wolfing that down all at the same time in one go.
Right. Oh my god. So that's kind of it I have on the Mattachine Society. We thank you all for joining us for this kind of brief period. I'm gonna turn it over to Colin and Twisting, them to kind of give their thoughts on the matter, or whether they think the Mattachine Society did well or what they did wrong. And then we'll kind of close out on that. So I'm gonna turn the floor over to you all. I'm gonna mute myself so you guys have the full floor.
I'm just gonna summarize what I said last time. It's amazing how much oh, for an anti-progressive movement, anytime there's like any kind of infighting, you ostracize another marginalized group that is also part of that other marginalized group you're fighting for. It tends to do more harm than good, and then just like whenever you do that, and it never fails. It always happens. It only pulls that movement farther back.
Yeah, it's kind of disappointing that this is a pre-intersectionality organization, which, I mean, not surprised they were even before the civil rights movement. So they were bound to, unfortunately, make these mistakes.
Oh yeah, because white people are gonna be white people, and men gonna be men,
Yep. White people be white, men be men.
White men be white men.
Yep. And it shows extensively.
You can't be part of this movement. You're a woman. You can't be part of this movement. You're black.
I mean, here's my kind of thing that I found curious about researching this is like, it's so, and it really shouldn't be interesting to me, but I mean, I see so many parallels is the word in like today's movement where like a lot of leftist and gay movements are extremely white. They have this kind of superiority complex, like gay men should take the forefront. And I feel that a lot of the criticism, like the effeminate flaming, the human torch gay, as I've heard them called, but the effeminate flaming gay, like the ones that are on TMZ, the ones that are on those house flipping shows, or there's over the top, in your face interface. Those types of people, like you kind of see them being the scene of the gay movement against white people and things of that nature in white media. But then it's also kind of like, are they there because they're identifiable easily as gay, or are they there because of people things like the Mattachine Society, it was easier for white people to identify with it. Like it's easier for white people to identify with a flaming, effeminate white gay guy. It is to like identify with, for example, Little Nas X, who when he did what was it? I think it was it Industry Baby? He was in the prison dancing with men.
I think
Yeah.
so.
That one, it was like there was so much media backlash, and Montanero too, which was hilarious because like the guy quotes Plato verbatim. It's a really amazing music video. There's a ton of imagery and art stuff for an art nerd like me. And like Lil Nas X said, he's like, our entire lives you've told us that we're going to hell, so like we're owning that. But then I kind of realized, wait, as a white gay guy, I was never told I was going to go to hell. I was told that like, people be like, I'd rather you were a murderer than be gay, because I could forgive you if you were a murderer. I couldn't forgive you if you were gay.
Understandable, unforgivable sin. Burn.
Right, but at least I got talking to. There's people who were gay who were like not white, who were people of color or Latino people. I mean, we don't even hear their stories. So I mean, it makes sense to me that like gay community is still very much white and still much prone to infighting. But I honestly, at that point in time, like with our more like you said, Callan, intersectional communities, like you said, twisting. With more openness among other societies now that their kind of key goals are being more pushed forward, we are kind of seeing a lot more unity now. Like it is a changing society in a lot of ways. That it is okay to be a person of color and gay. It is okay to be a trans person and gay, and these different intersections are coming together to form actually a tighter unit, like pulling the ropes tight on a basket. instead of all these groups pulling in different directions at different times, and we all hoist together, the movement becomes more solid. So I kind of feel the Mattachine Society was good. I feel that growing pains have definitely hampered it, and I feel it definitely had some bad impacts. I personally, and maybe it's because I'm white and I have that white privilege, I feel that it did jumpstart things.
If anything, that's what it did best.
Yeah,
It started a thing. It really it's like it's like the ignition in the vehicle that gets moving forward. Like
The
kind of
If-
gave us the radical